Hey there, and welcome to the CMMC Compliance Guide podcast. I'm Austin.
And I'm Brooke.
From Justice IT Consulting, where we help businesses like yours navigate CMMC and NIST 800-171 compliance. We're hired guns getting companies fast-tracked to compliance, but today, we're here to give you all the secrets for free, so if you want to tackle it yourself, you're equipped to do so. Let's dive into today's episode and keep your business on track. Well, today we're talking about something that trips up a lot of Department of Defense or Department of War contractors when they first start learning about CMMC. And specifically, I think this comes from an audience question as well, a comment.
Yes, it does.
So a lot of people assume that for CMMC Level 1, there must be some kind of formal process or formal assessment that happens where someone comes in and audits your environment step by step. So today, we're reviewing what CMMC Level 1 actually is and how to approach it.
That's right.
So when people first start learning about CMMC Level 1, one of the most common questions we hear is what a Level 1 assessment actually looks like. So Brooke, is that the right way to think about Level 1? How does an assessment fit in? Can you help explain that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So a Level 1 assessment, really you don't... a third party is not required, whereas a level 2 certification, where a third party is required, a C3 PAO is required to come and do your certification assessment, right? But a level 1, it's always self-attestation or self-assessment, but it is a formal process. You do have to go through it and do it, and there are several pieces to it. A lot of people just phone it in and say, "Yeah, we do that, check," but that's not the right way to do it, and you don't want to get caught with your pants down, so to speak. So you want to actually go through the formal process. Before you tell the government or before you self-attest that you are CMMC Level 1 compliant, you want to actually make sure you are and actually go through that process to do that formally. So when you say it, you are actually compliant with Level 1.
So before we dive a little deeper into what goes into attesting and what you should do before attesting, can you explain what CMMC Level 1 actually covers?
Sure. Yeah. So CMMC Level 1 basically covers FCI, Federal Contract Information. So it does not cover CUI. If you have CUI or will have as part of a contract CUI, then you're not Level 1. You're Level 2, and at that point you're either going to be Level 2 self-assessed or Level 2 C3 PAO certification. So one of the two, most likely the C3 PAO certification, but Level 1 is only FCI. So it's what you need to do to protect that FCI. Specifically, it is FAR 52.204-21, and that FAR rule just changed actually to 52.240-93. There were some FAR and DFARS rules changes to kind of help align things, and that's one of the things that changed. So it's easier for me to remember the old one that's been in place for a long time, the 52.204-21, but it has changed. So, but it is really just over FCI and protecting FCI, and there's 15 or however you look at them, there's 15 or 17 controls.
Yeah, I know we've talked about it in previous episodes, but it might be, since we're talking about it again, might be good to go over what, generally speaking, FCI is, general rule of thumb that people out there can use to identify whether they might be touching that.
Sure. So FCI is Federal Contract Information. So anything on that contract that is not public, in other words, if you have to go to a portal and log in to see the information, then it's non-public. Whatever information you can see without logging into a portal, I don't know, maybe somebody's email address or the name of the company, something like that. But if you have to, if it's non-public information about that contract, then that's going to be Federal Contract Information or FCI.
So if you're downstream, either directly with the government or a couple customers and subcontractors down from a federal contract, doesn't have to be directly with the federal government, then that's the kind of information you're talking about, right?
Yes. Yeah. It doesn't matter if it's directly with the federal government or if it's with a prime or just a subcontractor or someone else. If it's that federal contract information that has to do with the federal contract, any of that information that is non-public, that's FCI.
Yeah.
No matter where you're at in that supply chain.
So you may not even be touching, critical flight parts or, weapon systems or anything, and still this would fall on your shoulders.
Yep, absolutely.
So when we're looking at CMMC Level 1, how does that compare to Level 2 in terms of requirements?
So Level 1, there's 15 controls and something like 59 assessment objectives or something like that. And Level 2 is much more in depth. There's 110 controls and 320 assessment objectives. So it goes really in depth. Not nearly as in depth as the NIST 853, but it's the NIST 800-171 or was what CMMC is based on anyway. That is 110 controls for Level 2. It's 110 controls and 320 assessment objectives. Level 1 is a fraction of that, which is why a lot of people normally just kind of phone it in and check the box. You still got to do your due diligence, but Level 1 being a fraction of what Level 2 is, it's 15 controls and I have to go look, but it's somewhere around 59 assessment objectives. So you still need to do your due diligence. It's still very important. You got to have all your authorized users, for instance. You got to have those listed out. A lot of people don't even bother doing any of that for Level 1. They just say, "Oh yeah, we're good." So, but that Level 1 does require those controls and those assessment objectives to be covered.
So not near as stringent as CMMC Level 2.
Correct.
But still 59 things that you're telling the government that you're doing.
Absolutely.
So 59 chances for them to come back knocking and say, "Hey, can you prove that you're doing this?"
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So where does the idea, or maybe I should say misconception, come from of the need for an assessment come into play if someone is self-attesting to Level 1?
Well, the assessment comes in because you've got to implement all the controls and all the assessment objectives, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to assess your environment, see what you need to do, put those in, and then once you get finished, assess it to make sure it's there, make sure everything's good. Then
so there is a need for a self-assessment,
absolutely,
but not a third-party assessing.
Correct. There's a self-assessment that is necessary, but not necessarily a third party. You can have a third party come and help you do it, make sure you get everything covered and everything right. But it's however it is. It's extra credit. Actually, it's that's the assessment portion, right? The self-attestation, you're attesting to the government. Yes, I've gone through all this, and I do meet CMMC Level 1 controls.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think also probably from the fact that CMMC Level 2 focuses on a third-party assessment so much,
yep.
Maybe people just make the natural conclusion that you got to do that for Level 1 too.
I'm sure they do, and I'm sure that's why they think that. I think part of the other part of that is that they are it's kind of confusing as to what's needed, right? What exactly, what am I supposed to do for Level 1? Mm-hmm. It lays it out in the Level 1 assessment guide. Mm-hmm. You go read that and you'll figure it out pretty quick. But of course, you got to know some key things to look for, and we'll go over those here in just a minute. But
so for our video watchers, they might be usually keep things pretty, not cluttered here. We have a prop as we don't normally have. Right. So we're answering the question I guess they have for what the heck is on the table. So, but I thought there's a good natural spot to bring this up. This is a printout of the CFR, so electronic version of the CFR, specifically the 32 CFR, section.
Would that be eCFR if you've printed it out? And I'm just wondering, well, it's not electronic anymore. So
now it's the it's the. I'm sure there's a paper CUI joke there somewhere.
I'm sure. I have no doubt.
But this is 170.15 on the 32 CFR. So in the ECFR, if you just Google that, you can find it pretty easily, and then you can pretty decently search in there. So if you go search for the 32 CFR 170.15, this is where it defines what an assessment and what the affirmation requirements are for whenever you basically attest to CMMC Level 1.
Right.
And so I thought it would be helpful to print this out and show the viewers, our listeners here. And so sorry if you're listening, just memorize all this, I guess, because you can't see it. But so in here, there is specifically the Level 1 self-assessment under the procedures heading that specifically calls out how to do a self-assessment. And you do it in accordance with the scoring methodology described in 170.24. The government is really good at referring to 15,000 other documents, or places.
Go look here, go look there.
Yeah.
Get you jumping around and make it very confusing. They are good at that. Yes.
Yes. So, but the breadcrumbs are there. So
they are there.
You just
Absolutely.
have to, commit yourself to staying, paying enough attention, and not getting lost in the block of text that they give you.
So everybody that wants to look at the CFR and click through it and find all the little breadcrumbs and everything, you probably need to be good at puzzles.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. But I've kind of tried to put the puzzle together for you here. So this is the 32 CFR 170.15. So this tells you, how to do an assessment against yourself, and basically what your affirmation requirements are, what you're attesting to. And then it refers to the 170.24, which is here, right? And it basically tells you that you need to rate yourself met, not met, or not applicable, right? And so, and then it says a bunch of different stuff that basically says the things that you have to rate yourself against is the NIST 800 171A, and then it refers back to this 170.15, this mapping table here, which converts the CMMC Level 1 requirements to the 800 171A requirements. So basically, what this is saying is on the left column, the mapping table, those are all the things that you have to hold yourself against, right? Or assess yourself against. Right. So that is why I bring this up, because it is there and it is spelt out. And this is CMMC Level 1 is the easier version to do this yourself, right? Because it's kind of all within these few documents that it tells you what you need to do. So basically what it's saying is for the things on this mapping table, you got to have evidence, right? And documentation to what you're assessing to.
Yep, absolutely.
So I'll pause there because I think the next section is evidence, but I wanted to lay that out, and then we can talk about
my cheat sheet,
your cheat sheet as well.
I've got a cheat sheet here.
We never do this, but we both have one today. So we'll use that as a segue to the next question I have for you, which is before the senior official that of the business signs the attestation or tells the government that they are indeed CMMC Level 1 and those things are met, or very sparingly used, not applicable. What evidence should the organization actually have ready or documented?
Yeah, so kind of talking through this, and I'm using my cheat sheet because we don't always do Level 1 very much. Do Level 2 a whole lot more. So I need to make sure I don't get the wrong ones in here. But there's a few families. One is access control. You have to worry about access control, identification and authentication, media protection, physical protection, system and communications protection, system and information integrity. So those are the families you need to worry about. The first one in access control, for instance, is authorized access control for FCI data, right? They don't care about your personal data or your company data, really. They just care about their FCI data, right? And for level 2, again, they don't care about your data. They just care about CUI. You probably want to protect yours too, but that's all the government cares about is FCI or CUI. So that's what this is all about. So you got to have authorized access control for that, and that doesn't mean that. A lot of people say, "Oh, of course, we've got authorized access control. We use Active Directory." Check. Well, no, not really. I'm going to use another one of my cheat sheets, but I may not need it. But for authorized access control, these numbers are different. I'm used to the level 2 ones, but ACL1 -B.1.I. So it's authorized access control, limit information system access to authorized users, processes. I'll just cut that one short. Users, processes, and devices accessing that information, right? So, and processes is processes acting on behalf of users. In the IT world, we generally call those service accounts, something like that, right? So not a person. So a script, a service, something like that. But we generally call those service accounts. The assessment objectives, there's 6 of those. Same thing for level 2. Are authorized users, processes, and devices. So that's 3 different assessment objectives. Are they identified? Anytime you say identified, do you have a list of those users, and does it say that these are authorized? And have you actually authorized those? Has somebody read them, reviewed them? Yes, sign your name. Has somebody reviewed those, right? So you got to review those. You got to identify those and review those. Then it says the system access is limited to those authorized users, processes, and devices. So there's the other 3 assessment objectives. So are they identified? And is the system access limited as they are identified, right? Just using that one as an example, you've got to have a list of your authorized users, right? Users, processes, and devices. So all your computers, all of your access points, printers, anything else that's on that network that has access to that FCI data, it's got to be authorized in some manner if it touches it, right? Use another one for example. We'll just use the next one, ACL1B1.II. Okay, so for this one, transaction and function control, limit information systems access to the types of transactions and functions that authorized users are permitted to execute, right? So there's 2 assessment objectives. One is the types of transactions and functions that authorized users are permitted to execute are defined. Do you define those anywhere? How do you define those? Is it in the list? Do you have a policy? How are those transactions and functions that they're authorized to execute? How are they identified? You got to identify them somehow, right? Well, you can go into Active Directory and look and see what access they have. Yeah, but because they're in Active Directory doesn't mean you authorize them, right? So they've got to be authorized. So generally that's going to be a policy. So you could probably write one policy that covers all this. And then, there's some different lists you might need to have. But point being that you need to, when it says identified, then you've got to have a list. You've got to have a list or a policy that talks to what they're wanting here. So the second one is the system access is limited to those defined types of functions. So not only do you have to identify it, but then you have to tell them what you're doing. Just like level 2, you have to tell them what you're doing, and then you have to actually do that. Do what you tell them you're doing, right?
Show and tell.
Show and tell. That's right. So you might say, well, it's just self-assessment, self-attestation. They're never going to come and and look for all this stuff. Well, sure, we meet it. Well, yeah, but that's not what you're supposed to do. And if, for any reason, and we'll probably discuss this later on in the podcast, but for any reason, if you ever get caught and you have to show, yes, this is why I say I'm level 1 compliant, you need to have all that documentation there to back you up, and then examples of how you implemented it to show that you actually did that, right?
Mm-hmm. So it says it here on the 32 CFR 170.15, all the way at the bottom where I've highlighted right here. It says it's artifact retention. The artifacts used as evidence for the assessment must be retained by the OSA, that's you, for 6 years from the CMMC status date. So that right there tells you by law that you have to do all this and have it on file and retain it for 6 years.
I wonder why they want you to retain that for 6 years. Maybe in case some breach ever happens or something something goes on 5 years and 11 months down the road, they can go back and say, hey, Acme Company, we had this breach and it looks like it came from your direction. Mm-hmm. You said you're level 1 compliant. Can you prove that? And you're like, no, we just said we were level 1 compliant. That's, or if you say, yeah, we can prove it, but we threw those documents out after our, next assessment came out or whatever it may be. You do have to hang on to those, to the artifacts, all the documentation, and which points to the fact that you've got to have some documentation to archive, to hang on to, right? Mm-hmm. So you've got to have at least have a policy and an authorized list of users, devices, and processes.
Mm-hmm. So whenever people use the term "they threw the book at them," this is typically what they mean by "throw the book at you." It's all written down there. It tells you what you're supposed to do, and then if you didn't do it, then they can use that against you later.
Oh, that's absolutely.
So whether you did it or not, it doesn't matter. It's whether you had this. That's the book.
A typical thing is also for a lot of folks to do a CMMC Level 2 enclave, mm-hmm. and then get the rest of the network to a Level 1, right? Which is what we're talking about today,
right.
Which is great. That's a great plan. There's nothing, that's a great plan. There's nothing wrong with that. But point being that when you do all the really hard work to get that Level 2 environment in place, it's great. It's wonderful. What about your Level 1 network? Where is that documented? Is that documentation also in with your Level 2? Is it separate? How did you do that? How did you document it? Because if the rest of your corporate network, you set it as a Level 1, so you can handle all the contracts on that side, not necessarily a CUI, then you've got to have some evidence that you've done that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't want to have gone through the entire process of getting CMMC Level 2 certified and then have the Level 1 get you.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just to go through a couple more of these, there's different things in here that you're going to have to address, like the physical protection. It says manage visitors and physical access. For physical protection for PE.L1-B.1.IX, manage visitors and physical access. So the assessment objectives for that are, there's several of them here. There's 6 of them here. So visitors are escorted. Visitor activity is monitored. Audit logs of physical access are maintained. There you go. There's physical evidence that you need to maintain. Physical access devices are identified. What's a physical access device? Do you know? That's going to be a key. That's going to be a key card, anything like that. Those physical access devices need to be identified. And if you hand out the same key to everybody, there's an issue, right? So they need to be serialized. The cards that you get, the proximity cards or whatever you call them, those are generally serialized, no problem.
This is whenever customers usually look at us and go, "Are you serious?"
Yeah,
and we say
exactly.
yes.
Yeah,
because it says right there.
That single key you give out to the front door,
mm-hmm.
That everybody's got. What I can tell you is, I know. people hand out those keys and they're not always really good about giving it back. And if you think businesses are bad, churches are even worse. And there ends up being like 200 people that have keys to the place and you don't really know who's got them. But same thing here. We're not really talking about churches. So physical access devices are controlled. How do you control those devices? How do you control those keys? How do you know who has what keys? And physical access devices are managed. So physical access devices are identified, controlled, and managed. So those keys and key cards are identified, controlled, and managed, right? Identified means you got to have a lift somewhere. Visitors are escorted. Visitor activity is monitored, and audit logs of physical access are maintained. So that's audit logs of physical access. That's not visitor activity. That is audit logs of physical access are maintained. So how do you watch that? If it's a proximity card and they swipe it, there's a log, or there should be a log in a computer somewhere that hopefully you can get to that says who came in, or at least what badge number came in. If you assign that badge number to somebody, then you know who it is. Physical keys, they can just unlock the door and walk in. Sometimes if there's a key code on the door, there may be some kind of log that can go along with that. But if it's just keys and that's all you have, then you probably need a camera watching that front door so that your physical access can be monitored. That way it's monitored. Anybody that comes in and out, you can tell who it is. So that's how you would cover that if you don't have some other electronic way of capturing who comes in and out. So just another example of the kind of documentation you're going to need with this. It's not simply, we've got all this covered, we're good, just check the box. There's documentation that needs to go with it. It's not a ton. You can get away with a pretty small amount of documentation for it, but it's got to be there.
Yeah.
And it's got to be accurate and reviewed. So
it has to exist. And it can look as simple as, like you mentioned, a clipboard at the door for visitors, a camera on the door for that, your employee visitor log, a metal stamping kit for your keys if they don't come serialized, right? And I think we mentioned a couple other things I've forgotten now, but these aren't things that you have to spend a fortune on. You don't need some $20,000 iPad visitor system and $3,000 a door access control system. You can do these things on a budget and implement it. You just have to do the work.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think we've kind of already answered this, but I wanted to ask it again because it is a question that we've been asked before. If a company wanted to conduct a mock review before making an attestation for CMMC Level 1, what would that actually look like?
And just to be clear, there's not technically a mock assessment for Level 1, but a self-assessment, you need to assess your environment. One would be you need to do a pre-assessment and figure out where you are and where you need to be, or that'd be a gaps analysis also, however you want to phrase that. So when you download that CMMC Level 1 assessment guide, they're going to have that's going to walk you through it, right? And so part of this is just the same as a Level 2 assessment, whether it's self-assessment or a Level 2 certification. The three things you're going to do or have a choice to do are going to be examine, interview, and test. So you examine the evidence. You may interview someone to make sure that it's, of course, if you're the one that implemented it and you're the one assessing it, that's a little different, but preferably somebody's a third party, or not maybe a third party, but it could be within the company, somebody different than somebody who implemented it, right? So you can get a clear view on these things. And but anyway, so an examine, interview, and then a test, right? So you go look for that visitor log, or you go look for those to make sure the antivirus is up to date, or whatever it might be. So you just follow that Level 1 assessment guide and walk through that. And it's it's not a 30-minute thing. It'll take a little bit longer than that to really go through it and verify it. But that's what you need to do to assess yourself before that senior official goes to test that you're CMMC Level 1 compliant.
So, as we've said, CMMC Level 1 is a self-attestment and a self-attestment, right?
Attestation, yep.
Yeah, I thank you.
However you want to say that, you attest.
So you're assessing yourself and you're attesting, right?
Right.
So what I'm trying to say here is it's the honor system, right?
Right.
Yeah. But we keep saying when the government comes knocking, or if they do, right? What are the situations where someone might actually find themselves that they might actually find themselves in where a claim to Level 1 needs to be verified?
Well, I've seen it on Level 2. There may be some Level 1 instances. I'm not real sure, but the reported ones that I see are always Level 2. But most of the time, the lion's share of the time for Level 2, it's a whistleblower, right? So somebody on the inside, or not even on the inside necessarily, but somebody that knows about it may go to the government and say, "Hey, this company over here, Acme Brick Company," which I probably shouldn't use because I think there is an Acme Brick.
No, there is, yeah.
I was thinking Wile E. Coyote and Acme. So, but anyway, Company A over here, they say they're Level 1, and they're not even close. They don't have anything documented, and they're kind of willy-nilly over there, and you need to go check. So that's a whistleblower. And the other thing would be the other possibility would be some sort of breach, and it may not be your choice whether it's reported as a breach or not. So it may not be your choice, right? So, for instance, if one of your employees has an email breach, a token theft, which is, a really hard thing to guard against. So it may not be something that's your fault necessarily. There's always things you can do to improve security. So I'm not saying you can't avoid token theft, but it's
not
one of those
negligence.
Yeah, token theft is one of those more, and we can go into depth of what that is. But token theft is one of those things that's more harder to protect against. So if there's token theft and your employee, in other words, you've got username, password, and MFA enabled on these accounts, and they still get breached. Some hacker gets in. They send out a whole bunch of fake invoices, for instance, which is a really common thing to happen. And 500 different people get them. Maybe the IT department gets notified. The alert pops up, and they get in. They do their due diligence, and they kick that sucker out within 5 minutes. But they've still gotten in and done a little bit of damage by sending out fake invoices to people. Then, if one of those happens to go to, say, a prime, and they say, "Hey, you've had an email breach, and we've got to turn this in," so there, it's not your. Even if you don't have any of that information in that system, you've got a whole different system for it. Even if you don't have that, it may get turned in as a breach, as a cyber incident anyway, which it was. But whether it involves government data is a different story. Anyway, one of those may get turned in, and they may come knocking and say, "Hey, we need to review. You say you're Level 1 compliant. Let's review that." So that was a really long-winded story, an example of a breach, but I'm just trying to give you an idea of, what kind of breach that may not even be, complete negligence on your part, may kick off some sort of review of Level 1 compliance. So if they do come looking for that Level 1 compliance, they're going to say, "All right, you said you're Level 1 compliant. Show us your documentation." You go, "Documentation? You mean I have to have documentation for that?" They're going to say, "Well, there's strike one right there." So you do need to you do need to make sure you don't phone that in and you actually do what you're supposed to do, because there's a couple of instances right there, a breach or a whistleblower that may bring the government in to review those things.
Yeah. Yeah, one that we actually do see a fair amount for CMMC Level 1 in terms of verification is from primes or customers. They specifically, we've seen asked for evidence and further documentation that things are actually in place. So that we have seen. So if you got a customer that is doing their homework, you may find yourself in a situation where they're actually asking for evidence. That actually happens more in the near term, less of a risk of happening, more of a probably will happen at some point. So
absolutely. Yeah. And some of that is in the case of, before you get awarded a contract. Mm-hmm. Some of it is kind of after the fact, a prime coming back and saying, you know what, we need to firm all this stuff up and make sure our subs are good, and they may come back through asking for that stuff.
We've talked about when someone might find themselves in a situation where they're getting their CMMC Level 1 status verified. What is the risk of attestation and not actually being Level 1? But you said you were. If someone did come knocking, one of those scenarios we talked about happened, what could come out of that?
Well, if you attested that you were a Level 1 compliant, and you don't have any of the documentation or any of the proof to back that up, that brings about the False Claims Act, which is no joke. They don't mess around with that. They said they were going to make some examples of some companies. Whether the companies deserved it, the kind of example or not, I don't really know. Sounds like they probably did, but they have made some examples of some companies with. Now this is mainly Level 2, but the companies they've made examples the ones they've made examples of, they've gotten fines in the millions, fines in the hundreds of thousands, depending on the size of the company, size of the contract. So you can get fined, you could lose your contract. Or if it's a minor violation, they might, slap your hand and say, get things in order and prove to us that you did, but for just completely phoning it in and checking the box without doing any of your homework, that's a False Claims Act, and that's a serious violation. Mm-hmm. Something I would not want to do.
Yeah, right.
Level 1 or Level 2.
So if someone is listening today, preparing for Level 1 compliance, what's the main takeaway?
So the main takeaway is really what we've been talking about this whole episode. Level 1 is not just about, saying, hey, Level 1's easy. We've got it covered. We've got bases covered. It is not about that. Well, it is about that, but it's also about being able to prove, writing down what you do and doing what you say you do, right? And being able to prove it. So that's what it's about. It does take documentation. It also takes some actual technical controls implementing those, but it does take some of that documentation. You have to do your due diligence and do the documentation, and save that documentation, save the artifacts, save the logs, stuff like that, and make sure that you're covered there. Again, it's not just a check the box we're good kind of thing. It is an actual assessment and proof is what you need.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Brooke. Another thing I'm going to bring up, my last prop that I have for today, is that this keeps coming up. Level 1 does in various different scenarios, and in preparing for today's podcast and everything, kind of, I don't know, I guess saw the need for more education around this, because you get a lot of CMMC Level 2 stuff. Mm-hmm. People talk about it. There's other, guides and stuff. CMMC Level 1 just kind of redheaded stepchild, if you will. So we've got kind of a draft here of just kind of an all-in-one comprehensive guide on CMMC Level 1. It says simply, read this before you self-attest to CMMC Level 1.
And that would be good.
Yeah. So it just kind of goes in a little more in depth and puts it in written form as to everything that we talked about today. Tells you, the problem, what self-attesting actually means, explains kind of the False Claims Act information, kind of explains the need for everything that we talked about in the CFR 32 CFR requirements. And then we have broken out in longer form of what you just did earlier, live, referencing it with your phone. Each of the control IDs, the requirements, and then listed out example evidence, so you can a little easier find your way to what you actually need to do for each of the requirements. So we're working on this right now. It's not a super big priority because we got a bunch of other stuff on our plate. But if you're interested in it, you're welcome to email us, give us a shout, and we'll put you on the list whenever it's done. We'll send it out, and then if it happens to be done by the time this episode comes out, we'll provide a download for it as well. But anyway, I just wanted to say that. So if this is something that you're facing, and we do hear a lot of people as it keeps coming up, then we're working on a resource for it, and it's all comprehensive for you to DIY yourself. So there's that. Brooke, do you have anything else before we end this bad boy?
I think I'll go back to documentation. Our favorite 3 words, our favorite phrase there.
Need to get
That's what it all boils down to.
Need to bust that shirt out again.
I do. I need to remember to wear that shirt.
All right. Well, cool. Well, thank you guys for your time today. If you have questions about what we covered, please reach out to us. We're here to help fast track your compliance journey. Text, email, or call in your questions, and we'll answer them for free here on the podcast. You can find our contact information at cmmmccomplianceguide.com. Stay tuned for our next episode. Until then, stay compliant, stay secure, and make sure to subscribe.